Going? Don't see the light. All right. Hello, epilogues for Atlanta and all the other cities getting this one. First, I'd like to take a cue from my elders and my betters in the public areas, and especially in the television areas. And I'd like to start, first I would like to acknowledge my own shoddy personal life. I promise to do better, and I would like to apologize for my drinking and sexual habits. And just in general, I want to acknowledge all the shortcomings and misdeeds, and certainly give you my personal word to try and do better. I wanted to, a little more about the last epilogue, I guess I did, but I wanted to be a little more specific about two difficulties that everyone faces and it keeps popping up here and out there, and that I don't really talk about them because it gets into almost about me playing with sentences and words of me having to say something about me, and we can't escape it because the obvious point being that none of this would be going on if I wasn't here doing this. So, for better, for worse, upside down, inside out. So we cannot extract the me element. But there are two difficulties that I want to acknowledge that for you out of town, if you may think that you never hear about it and that we discuss it here, we do not discuss it here. So it's not something that you've been left out of, but I just want to acknowledge not just my shoddy personal life and shortcomings, but acknowledge that I'm aware of the fact that there are two distinct difficulties that everyone out there and here face regarding your involvement with this kind of activity. And one is what to possibly do about yourself, and the other one is what to do with to meet the need, to meet my apparent wish, take either one you want, for this to expand. And there is specific problems in both areas, difficulties, and I'll admit them for you. I just never talk about them. Let's take the last one first. First, I am completely aware of the difficulties that you people have out there and you people here have in Atlanta. And one more time, I will say that some of this is very specific to you people out of town because some of you I've never even met. Some of you haven't been to those cities since some of you started attending, and some of you try and consider yourself regular participants of this. And some of you may think, well, wait, boy, I'm having problems trying to help them expand this and advertise it out here in Phoenix or at Encino, or do they get it in Tarzana? God forbid. And that no one seems to ever acknowledge the difficulties. But there are very distinct difficulties that we don't talk about. And trying to get what appears to be new people or new audience. And probably the central one, and I would suspect that many people, all right, I would suspect that some people, maybe several people here and maybe even out of town, have even thought this. I will say that the people here have had the decency not to mention it to me. But let me say that I suspect that there are people who've thought that I do not, as much as might be profitable, play the role of doing this correctly. That I don't look right, talk right, present it right. And I would not be surprised to find out that some of you in other cities, and even here, have tried to expose somebody to it, and they went, I don't like him. Or I don't like the way he looks, I don't like the way he stands. All sorts of things. And we're not really talking about me personally, because the point is, as some of you should know, whatever it is that I'm doing is not an act. But worse than that, it's not a non-act. See, it's not the opposite, which is why you can't deal with it. Because if it was, and surely I don't have to tell you people I'm about to, obviously. Don't get involved that I'm now telling you what kind of guy I am. That ain't it. But to assume that, if I came out here and started trying to run the tapes nude, and I tried to talk in a fake accent, or I tried to speak in Spanish, which my Spanish amounts to poquito, and a few other words I won't burden you with, then somebody could think, some of you could think, well, wait a minute, it's some sort of, I bet it's like a challenge to see if people actually listen to the information, not get involved. You know, he's wearing a mohawk, or he's, you know, a whole bunch of gold chains, or nude, or whatever it was, that it's like, so people have to get over this and deal with the important information. Not only is it not that, it's not the opposite of that. See, because if it's the opposite of that, then people could go, well, wait a minute, I see what he's doing. He would expect that, you know, we would think he'd come out in a good suit or shades, and each person that might show up to hear this somewhere, let's just say that they had their general expectation of what it was and how I was supposed to look and how I was supposed to act. And somebody might be pleased that I dressed casually, that I had long hair, that I had short hair, I had a beard, I had no beard, I wore shades. Who knows what? Do you understand? But as long as it was an act of some kind, or its opposite, that is, a non-act, then they could, as far as they were concerned, directly respond to it. And what you get is a little less. I know that at the practical level it may not seem to be much of a working distinction, because they don't come back, you feel like perhaps that you failed in a job. But the kind of people that are inclined to wander into this, the first kind, the kind that are immediately inclined to most be attracted to it, are the ones that almost immediately are repelled by it. Yeah. And they very likely blame it on me. And I'm not saying it's not true, because they cannot separate me from it. And it's not just a point of something that be subject to some kind of remedial treatment, which I wouldn't do anyway, but not to start taking a poll of people that leave and say, well, what is it you didn't like? Maybe we can fix it up. Because the truth is, we couldn't really fix it up, is what I'm getting at. Because I am sure that some of you out there have bitten your little earnest fingers and tongue to keep from trying to write me or to tell me here that, well, a whole bunch of people said they'd like it better if you had a beard, or they'd like it better that if you didn't ever use profanity. God knows what, I didn't even want to hear it. Not that, because it cannot be really affected. Because you might say, well, I just know. I've had too many people say that, you know, you're too tall. Could you maybe squat down? Could you sit? It's something. But you understand, it cannot be changed. Not that I couldn't do it. One more time, we're not talking about me personally. This is not what kind of guy I am. Because it's not an act, and it's not a non-act. And the difficulty is of me continually saying, you got to get more people, or I'm going to quit sending tapes out, or I'm even going to stop it here. And I'm going to have to tell you the truth, just to put your little minds at ease and you don't think you're going crazy. Based on our time and place and what we're doing, and I'm saying we, which I'm just being smart ass, me, this is an extremely hard sell. At least any of you think, like in other cities, that you hadn't been in touch and maybe you're doing something wrong. No, to go out and talk to 1,000 people, to send out 5,000 handbills on the street and one person show up, I mean, some of you may think, well, wait a minute, the weight of the universe is on us, or we put the wrong thing in the handbill. I'm telling you, assuming you did something that was sort of reflective of me, then you didn't put the wrong thing. And if you want to try it, just do the opposite. It won't be any better. In other words, well, at least some people here heard it. I hope some of you out there did. Because the object of this is not to keep you continually involved in what appears to be a useless task, or to make you feel bad. And for me to make threats, if you don't get more people, I'm going to stop the tape. I can do that anytime. It's not a threat, and it's not to make you feel bad. And I want to acknowledge that there is an extreme difficulty in this. And I'll bet you some of you, I'll go a little bit further, will gossip about you. Not you personally, any more than me personally. But I bet you there's some of you that have had people show up in the other cities, or even here, some of you people that brought in new people, and if you glanced around at them, or maybe you didn't bring them, you just saw some new people, and you glance around just within the first few seconds, the card roots start being read, or I walk up on stage, and you can just sense in them that they go, God damn, I got to get out of here. And they don't really know why. If you ask them, they would have some reason, maybe. That's not the point. But it's just, and they were the ones that showed up. They said, oh, handbill, and they showed up. And all it takes is just a few seconds. And even you can look. So we're not blaming it on them. Even you look and you just see, as soon as it starts, in some way you can, quote, see or feel that they got absolutely no business being here. They will never have any idea what this is about. Of course, that brings us up to the other part that I'm going to have to point out. That there is no doubt, I'm aware of this, I don't talk about it. But there are plenty of people sitting right here that have been around a good while, and there are people out there that, in a sense, if I suddenly said, all right, everybody's got to tell me exactly what you think this, just give me some description of why you like this and what you think it is, or you can't come back. A whole bunch of you will be, looking for some kind of crib sheet or somebody. What am I going to tell him? In other words, there are plenty of you, if I said, does anybody have an idea, if I put it crudely and say, do you really know what this is about? May I suggest that out there in other cities and even here, I would not get a majority of a positive response. If I could force people's nervous system to respond, what do they call it? The truth. Do you actually know? Of course, you would have to assume, or I'm assuming you would assume, that I would know. And if I looked at you individually and I said, do you know what this is about? Do you actually get it? I would not be at all surprised, much less upset or fearful, to find that the majority did not give me a positive response. Huh? So then imagine people just walked in off the street. Oh, I like this, or I heard something about it, or I saw it on TV, or at any rate, and they walk in, and within seconds, you can feel it. Or you can look at them and realize they got no business being here. But you cannot get involved with that. Because if you did, then I would have to be involved. That's not the point. But then I would have to start saying, well, listen, for every 1,000 people that you drag in this door some way, I can tell you beforehand that there might be 1 or 2 of them that have any business at all being here. The rest of them don't. Well, what kind of goddamn sales pitch, what kind of encouragement is that to you? I mean, you're having hard enough time out there trying now in California and New York and Arizona and everywhere else in Canada of trying to drag people in. Because those of you that are getting something out of it, you think, boy, there's got to be people that would enjoy this. I'm not saying there's not, but they are not like buses running every 15 minutes down the street. They're not even like squirrels in a busy park. And what you end up with, just time after time, is people that have, in a sense, no business whatsoever being here. And they know it almost immediately. I just want you to know that I know it. So what? Until the need changes. I took part of the blame when I said the need to expand this, or the need / my apparent wish for it to expand. But it is extremely difficult. To the other part, there's a difficulty that we don't really talk about because I don't lay this out as being some kind of course and there doesn't seem to be much structure. But let me say again, that as open-ended, as inconclusive as ordinary people might find this, as unstructured, there is always at hand the possibility of an active step that does amount to, we just consider I'm using colloquial terms since I already did it, there is like an initial and then an ongoing stage of, I got it. Not I got it on this good old time-proven Zen, mystical basis, cosmic consciousness, permanent epiphany. It's not the thing of, being Paul Bunyan on the road to Damascus, or whoever it was. Being struck by the hand of God, or poor Mohammed going in a cave to take it easy, and Gabriel goes, wake up! Not that, not when I say I've got it, but there is, you people have got to admit to yourself, you might as well, that if I forced you, if I just took everybody in a closet and I said, this is important, you got to look me in the eye, have you got any idea, after all the time you've been here, whatever time it is, if I say, have you got it? Do you know what I'm doing? Do you know what this is about? Not just me, but do you know what this is actually about? You got to tell me the truth. Think how many of you would have to go, I mean, and many of you that I treat like, that you're just a soulmate, part of the family. Or if you want to look at it intellectually, I don't treat anybody as though, well, No, you're doing pretty good for a novice. Or, you know. Nobody can accuse me of treating any of you in a condescending manner. It doesn't even exist. And yet the truth is, I'm aware of the fact that if I said, you really know what I'm doing, some of you has been around here that I would depend on as much as my own family. Some of you that I would really depend on. I know without a fact, if I said, you really know what this is about, it'd almost break your heart unless I'd diffused it now. But if I'd done this without any preparation, you'd go. And if I say, can you tell me just in a few words or a lot of words, can you just tell me, do you know what this is really up to, what this is about? I know that. That is not good, bad, or indifferent. That is a fact. But there is the possibility, an active possibility. And it's not a one-time thing. It's not, suddenly you are struck that, now I got it. But there is the shock that I want to call, and what do you mean I want to call? I just did it, I'm about to do it again. All right? That I want to call an initial and a continuing kind of shock, and just one decent description is, I've got it. You don't necessarily say that, and it's not, I've got it, and now I've got it forever, because if you did, it's a dead-end street. There is no I got it forever. But it does happen that your nervous system, the energy, expands in your own nervous system. And it's here. No. The things that I say on tape to the public, it's not any different. It's not in your soul. It's not in your spirit. That's not some kind of act for everybody else to try to get them distracted from religion. It's here. It's the only here. That's the only here there is. But the kind of, for anybody that I cannot do anything about it. But anybody that's attracted to this, anybody that life had already wired up for this. Because you see, I damn well not only do not try to convert, and I keep telling you I couldn't if I wanted to. You know, of course, that's a cheap shot, you know, in case anybody thought, well, boy, what a decent guru he is. What a decent mystic, because he says that he wouldn't try and trick and attract people, and then he goes, even if I could, ha ha. Consider it. That's no big deal. I can't. So it's easy to say, well, I wouldn't if I could. Big deal. It's only ordinary people that think, yes, wait a minute, I could be tricked. I could be hypnotized and dragged into some kind of cult. Yeah, they could. So it's no big deal. It's just they're out there in the city and they just wander from one cult to another. At any rate, it is not just, as little as I talk about it or refer to it, it is not just, as you damn well know, I'm just going to put words again on it since I don't, but it's not just sitting here and it's not just listening to something. Because those of you that would say that, no, I cannot tell you what it is. I don't know. I'll tell you the truth. I do not know what you're doing. I don't know what this is really about. I just can't stop doing it. There is proof of something if you got to have it. The proof of something being that it is having an effect on your nervous system. But see, it's tied also to the difficulty of this apparently being such a stripped down, unstructured thing that you can't tell anybody. And it's not an act. I'll repeat one more time. But you can't really tell anybody if they say, what kind of rituals do you do? Or what kind of honor and respect do you have to pay for that guy running it? And you start thinking, well, nothing. And there is no answer right or wrong. They ask all the standard questions. It would sound as though somebody, well, yes, I've always been interested. I think this is what I've been looking for. And every question they ask, if, again, you were trying to respond truthfully, they're not going to find any answer you give to be much of an answer. Not even the kind of answer they can find fault with. If they say, well, how often do you fast? And you say, well, you never mentioned it. See, now that's not the same. I'm just picking out an example at random. It's not the same if you say, how often do you fast? And they say, oh, I'm glad you asked me that because he has us fasting at least once a month. The person can go, no. Now, I met a guy in India once, so-and-so, and he said that nobody amounts to bullshit in the mystical game unless they fast once a week. Or they might agree, once a month. This is the kind of place I've been looking for. But if you say, well, subject never came up. It's a kind of repulsion. It's a kind of turnoff. Not that we're going to change it because they didn't belong here. It's a kind of indifference of the revolution that is the ultimate defense, not that we're trying to turn people away. I'm still talking about that I'm aware of the difficulty, the hard sell of this, because if there's nowhere to either kick or be kicked, then people who say, well, I might come see that, let me ask you a couple of questions. Any question they ask, if you responded in a way that, if you thought I was looking over your shoulder, and now I'm going to tell you what to say, but at least you didn't want to make an ass of yourself, or do something where I went, Jesus, I can't believe you said that, then any answer you give them to whatever the question is, when they say, well, let me ask you one or two serious questions, because I think I might really come there and enjoy it. And you go, well, I hope so. And they say, let me just ask you two questions, or one question. I can guarantee you already, if you gave closer to what should be a proper answer, they're not going to simply just like the answer. They won't even know why. They're just going to be, do you follow? Such as, they ask what it is, well, how often do you pray? Or what's your attitude toward religion? As far as I can tell, we don't have one. I mean, they can't say, well, may God put a pox on you, or they can't say, well, finally, a group that has the right kind of negative attitude toward, if you just say, well, we don't seem to have one. On top of all of that was what I was really trying to get you, or I was trying to point out for a second. There's a distinct possibility without me ever holding it out as some kind of plum. But it goes like in stages, and it's not because you don't, when it happens in this way, you're not then tied to me. Boy, as you begin to see it, not on the basis I begin to see what he's talking about, you might think about it that way, but it's not on the basis I talked about it. It's on the basis that your nervous system now is processing energy in an expanded manner. But how can you talk about that? If any of you who can hear this, how could I reasonably, if I was an honest man, not trying to mistreat anybody, had no agenda, how can you describe that? And the answer is, of course, you can't. Because to describe it, you've got to have something to kick against. You've got to start and say, well, it's a good thing you people, I think we've got narrowed down to serious people here and out of town. It's a good thing that you found me when you did, because things are a lot worse than they imagine out in the street. And I'm glad you found me, because I am the intellectual, the spiritual ark that will save you all, because terrible things are afoot out there. And everybody has got some response. Maybe half of you then go, well, I knew it. I knew it'd come to this. I'm getting out of here. Or the other half of you then go, well, finally, drop that facade and admit the truth. I knew things were bad. If he knows it too, then he must know the way out, or he might. If there's nothing to kick against, how can you promise? How can you say, well, stick with this and continue to carry my picture in your billfold, continue to chant my name, continue to be here more often, continue to bring me more gifts, and the more you do this, the more likelihood you'll reach stage alpha. You'll reach the next level, the X17 level of consciousness. Then, of course, more is required, and it has to be bigger gifts. At least people have the feeling that, well, all right, this is going somewhere. Even if half of them, when they hear it, go, I ain't putting up with this crap. I've been through this before. I'm not going to do this. And so half of them leave. But then half of them go, well, I'll stick around and see what happens. Because there is the feeling that there is a substantial collective goal, that there is something external to you to say, well, this will definitely happen. Now, I cannot guarantee it'll happen somewhere between 1 and 3 years, according to how often you're here and how willing you are to contribute when it's my birthday, and when it's my semi-annual birthday, when it's my left knee's birthday. It's according to how you do. But if you are not bad-mouthing your master, if you're not having to speak ill of your captor, even when you're not free of it. See, that's the only ordinary people speak ill of life. To say, well, I'm being held down. Of course, they always attribute to something specific. I'm being held down. The Azerbaijans think I'm being held down by the Armenians. The Christians think I'm being held down by the Muslims. The Muslims, I'm being held down by the Hindus. You got to think that life has captured me in some way. And that's the people that can halfway imagine, well, I'm almost free. But even if I'm not completely free, at least you know one thing, you've got a new hobby. Badmouth the motherfucker's holding us. But if you got nobody to badmouth, how can you have any idea, wait a minute, how are we going to gauge how free I get? How are we going to gauge along the way, what's my next stage of freedom, of higher states of consciousness? Hey, I don't know. It's not true, but if you're looking for, I want additional freedom, then I got to wait because that's a comma. You're saying, I want additional freedom because you're about to say, from the government, from my past, from my family. In other words, you are very upset that you grew up on 4th Street. Well, by God, we got to do something about that. We'll curse that motherfucker 4th Street. You tell me what happened. Just tell me about 4th Street in general. All you got to do is say 4th Street and your eyes light up. And so the thing is, well, I'll get somewhere. At least I'll get away from there. That's not the revolution. Because the real revolutionist has got nothing ill to say about his old address. Not because of some effort. It's not an act. Because if he got anything to say ill about his old address, he is no longer a revolutionist. As Kairu put in another context tonight. But those of you that feel like, since I brought up and made the setup already, that if I insisted, you've got to tell me, do you have any idea? Can you tell me truthfully, look me in the eye, and tell me you know what this is all about? No thing I can tell you. It is not necessarily that way forever. Because all your nervous system has got to do is to process energy higher than it has to. That's all. Not in any particular way is why it's hard to attract people to it. That's why very few people need it, because they could hear even that and go, wait a minute, that's what I'm after. Then if you have to test them, you say, well, why? And if they got an answer, there is no why, except in the city, except back at the ordinary level. And the ordinary level is, I want to be free. To do what? I don't know. Or I'm a rebel. That great old joke. What are you rebelling against? What do you got? It's not just a joke. It's not just a line from a movie. That is it. Let's go out and be rebellious today, they say in college. Somebody says, against who? I don't know. You know, which department hadn't we attacked? Economics. Let's go get them. That's the point. If it's freedom from something, it's just a hobby. And that's what is lacking in this sort of thing, is people say, well, exactly what is it about? Well, it's normally about an hour and 10 or 15 minutes. No. You know, what are you for? What are you against? What are you struggling against? And the closest you can say is, I'm struggling against, you know, feeling like I got to struggle against this stuff. I'm struggling against my natural propensity to badmouth my old address. Well, where'd you used to live? Well, to tell you the truth, I still live there mostly, but I'm trying to get away from it. And then you realize, well, I shouldn't really have said that. And they say, so it's to help you move away from what you, I assume you mean this metaphorically, to move away from your old address, what you are. And then if you suddenly came back to your revolutionist senses, you'd really think, well, I wish I hadn't said that. Because it's not a battle between me and my old address. You could look upon this, if nothing else. I'm just trying to be a little encouraging in a way. You could look upon the meetings, the tapes, the Kairus. It's just like a spur. I'm tempted to say a catalyst, but the John D. MacArthur Foundation has about used that one up, hadn't they? The John D. and Catherine MacArthur Foundation. A catalyst for change. I shouldn't be laughing, though. That's having paid for PBS. They keep, well, they now slip in small commercials, but thank God they're only graphics and they only last a few seconds. But it's kind of a spur. That if you didn't have this, you wouldn't know what to be doing. That if you still had the kind of interest, if everything could be different and yet be the same. If I wasn't here, if we wasn't doing this, if you didn't find something else like this, which in your dreams, if this is what you need. just the fact is this. You wouldn't even get what you've gotten thus far, however little that may be, by yourself. It's why I've got no real tolerance anymore in the little thing we went through, and me telling you, even in other cities, those that are playing around with it, I just want their name off the list. I didn't even want to see their name or hear about them. It's not anything personal. But the idea that, well, I like some of what you do. I get this from people in other cities and notes here and there. And some of you, it's happened here. That, well, I've really gotten a lot out of this for the last year or so or whatever it was, but I think I'll take a kind of hiatus, and because I see that ultimately I've got to do this on my own. Nobody seemed to like that Cairo. It was just only a few nights ago that I pointed out that would-be pseudo-rebels, when they want to escape the kingdom, without fail, they'll take the king's own words to use as their excuse for making a run for it. Well, I get these notes from out of town. I've been attending the meetings out there. Do you remember me? I've written you, and I'm out here in Pasadena. And I have really gotten a lot out of this, but as you said, back on June 17th, 1989, which, they can't prove it by me, they say, you said that eventually a man must do it for himself, so I'm beginning to feel as though, if you don't mind, I'm going to quit attending the meetings for a while, and I'm going off and do this work on my own, and I may or may not be back when I need your help. I've got no feeling one way or the other. I'm not mad, and we're still not talking about me. I'm trying to get you to see how life is. But it's a waste of time. And for them to think, well, I'll keep in touch and I'll let you know how I'm doing. I know how they're doing. I know how they're doing as soon as they said that. It's a simple fact. It's hard to believe, saying very casually, that anybody would put up with this and believe they're benefiting from it and then think that I don't know any more than that. Of course, I'm being silly because you can't. If you're at that level, you figure, well, hey, everybody's 4 feet tall. But the thing about, well, I'll keep in touch and I'll let you know how I'm doing. I know how you're doing. It's not sarcastic. It's not hostile. But to say, well, I'm going off because, as you said, as soon as I see that in a note, I don't normally even finish it, to tell you the truth. As soon as somebody starts quoting me, I know what's coming up. They're going to take something that they said I said, and they're going to use it for an excuse for a needed time out. So they don't have to tell me, I'm going away and do so-and-so. I know exactly what they're going to do. Or they don't have to say, well, I'll keep in touch and let you know how I'm doing. I know how they're doing. Because the fact is, you would have not, whatever it is you've gotten out of this, you wouldn't have gotten it without me, without you being involved with this. And that's just a simple fact. I know it. I know it collectively, and I know it individually. And you might as well know it. But do note, part of the trouble of trying to stick around with it is, I don't rub it in. I don't make you feel guilty about it. I don't make you admit it. It almost makes me, I'll have to go home and comb my tongue by even having to say it. But every now and then, I guess we need for me to say some of what you think, and you wonder, should I think this or not? All of you, on your own, would have never thought of this. You would have never had this experience. Now, I know that some of you were having weird and mystical thoughts before you met me, because a bunch of you are on the verge of being nuts before you met me. So don't worry about any of you and your people, writing me and say, wait a minute, you don't know the kind of psychedelic trips I took on drugs or through Channing or when I studied with. Oh, sure I do, because a bunch of you were just almost basket cases. It's not that unusual, because it is, nip and tucko. The difference between those of you that have stayed and got something out of this and those that walk in prepared for a mystical experience, and just as soon as I show up or they hear the first Kairos, they go, where's the door? And they don't know why. It's not what that sort of nervous system needs. The reason I'm renewed was requiring more active participation, or if you're going to be a regular part, even out there, is to show up and you people meet, and when it's humanly possible to be there, because there is an effect this has on the right people. That you just got to face the fact, and I won't bring it up again for another decade or so, unless I have to, that you would not be what you are now. You wouldn't be thinking about such things. You wouldn't be considering that we wouldn't even have the possibility you had it not been for you getting involved with me. That's just a fact. But that is not the end of it. And it has to be, the reason that I'm encouraging you now or demanding that there be some kind of regular attendance, at least to the tapings, and I say participation, at least trying to get them on more stations wherever you are, to do something. Handing out handbills, doing something. As near futile as it seems, is to do that because it has a combined effect. It's not just coming here and it's not just doing something else, because if it was just doing something else, we'd be back to a good old cult or a good old ordinary religion. We'd be involved with the continuing forever building fund. Busy work. And since we don't know what we're doing, here's what we'll do. We'll buy me a new Rolls, and then we'll buy me 2 new Rollses, and then we'll build a big fine building, and then we'll buy me a Maserati for me to put in the trunk of the Rolls. As long as you don't know what you're doing here, you can always apparently do something out there. But there has to be a kind of combination. That is part of the need to try and do what I was referring to as an expansion of this, as hard sell as it is. So I have tried to give you some comfort and encouragement to conclude this, while pointing out that certain parts of it are almost impossible. So fucking what? It's not absolutely impossible, because I would not have you doing that. I've already brought up the subject itself is not to keep you involved with doing the impossible, nor is it to, by any means to make you feel bad out in other cities, to think, well, God, he expects us to, I bet he didn't say it exactly, but I bet he expects us to round up 50 new people here and have them here every time. Real nice people. They don't give any trouble. They come here on time. They sit and they don't spit in the floor, and they're always here. I bet that's what he expects. And hell, we've got 2 new people showing up in the last 3 months. God, what if he knows that? Sure, I know it. It's not to make you feel bad, but it's also no excuse to say, well, you just admitted yourself tonight that it's almost impossible to do. But I also said, so fucking what? Because this is almost impossible for you to do. You already admitted. And I said, if I demanded, you've got to tell me, do you know what I'm up to? Do you know what this is about? So don't talk to me about what's possible, or don't talk to me, well, wait, this is nearly impossible, so we shouldn't have to try it. Well, I guess that's enough for 6 months worth of epilogue, isn't it? So even though I am somewhat disheartened, discouraged, if you want to know the truth, because, well, to read that 78% of the American public believes that James Brown was guilty and Dan Quayle is not, to read that Barbara Mandrell continues to outsell both George Jones and Placido Domingo combined, I've got to tell you there is a certain degree of disappointment in my life, but I would also like to point out that, on the other hand, there are several examples, but one comes to mind, and especially having to do with you people, I am somewhat encouraged over the fact that, for instance, just one, is in Los Angeles, Stewart has abandoned the use of capital letters. And I am somewhat he pointed out to him, but I am somewhat, I gotta admit, right now, I'm somewhat encouraged over Stewart doing that and the multiple ways he has found to spell his name. I mean, that, I wasn't just trying to sing them, but that, and also discovering, back on St. Quantum's, a possibility that from New York, of course, that Hank may be the 3rd missing Giesenslaw brother. that still buoys my spirit just to think about it. To receive those nice calligraphed envelopes from Philadelphia, to receive the nice, I should never mention it, Ellen, every 2 weeks when she sends a report, she once sent it enclosed in a postcard from the, I think, Museum of Modern Art. Anyway, it was a nice color postcard replica, and I found a comment, she sent several, and she said, well, she had a box or somebody gave it, but I'm afraid, as much as I enjoy that since I mentioned it, now I picture, this is a hint to give you a way out, but now I picture that Ellen is out and has Mel and everybody else in the New York group looking for more and more of those postcards. I should try and think of things that encourage me. What else? Bill Tarr went back to school just in time. Yes, well, it's good to know in New York that they have those high school equivalency night. Is that what he was doing? Oh, that's me. No, well, that's enough personal, isn't it? Now, watch. It's a good thing you are not ordinary people. Or now, we'd have a handful of people in L.A. go, why the hell did he mention Stewart and he didn't mention me? Jesus Christ. Well, I'm proud of Tom Kelly that he hadn't crashed a plane into my house. I'm glad that I'm proud of the fact and encouraged that Clyde has never sent me any dates that were loaded with botulism or ballistic missiles or what else can I? Is that enough? Mel's never tried to sell me any kind of futures on the Japanese bond market. Leaving on a laugh and I'll look thoughtful, maybe that'll. And if it'll help the sales pitch, no, I'm not going to tell you. It'll be a surprise. Is everyone now fully encouraged and confused at another level? If so, as always, for you personal people, it has been time well spent.